Hey guys, today we'll do a deep dive into the question, which is the best anti-infantry tank in the Space Marines Codex? Is it the Predator Destructor or the Gladiator Reaper? Spent a lot of time math hammering and rolling the dice to make sure that we know which tank is the best against particular infantry choices. So without further ado, let's dive right in and see which one you should choose for your list. First, the basic overview. You will see in this video that these two are very similar up until the point that we discuss their guns. There, the situation will become quite complicated, so stay tuned for that. Both vehicles are great anti-infantry shooting choices, and if you have that role in your army that you need to fulfill, both of these will work great. Reaper costs 150 points and Destructor costs 130 points. Reaper has 12 wounds, but Predator has 11 wounds, so Reaper is a bit higher on the points per wound cost. They both move 10, they both have toughness 10, they both have 3+ save, they both are OC 3. That's where similarities pretty much end, because their guns are very different. The Reaper has 12 twin link shots with its twin-barreled onslaught cannon. They are strength 6 AP 0 damage 1 with devastating wounds, which is always a good combination when you have twin-linked, and also it has sustained hits 2 against infantry for this particular gun, not all of the guns. He also has 2 Tempest launchers, which each of them does 4 shots, so that's 8 shots in total of strength 4 AP 1 damage 1 with rapid fire 4 on each gun, so it will be 16 shots if you are very close, and in this case it's 24-inch range, so it will be 12 inches. Main gun, by the way, is 24-inch range as well. And also it has D3 shots of the Icarus auto pod, whatever, the rocket pod, at strength 8 AP 1 damage 2, and also 3 shots at strength 4 AP 0 damage 1 from the Stubber, and this one is the only 36-inch range gun on this tank. Destructor is much simpler, thankfully, because the Reaper is actually a mouthful. You have an autocannon which does 4 shots at strength 9 AP 1 damage 3 at 48-inch range, so there lies quite a big difference between the two. And it has rapid fire too, so at 24 inches it'll be 6 shots instead of 4. Plus it has 6 shots in total from 2 different heavy bolters at strength 5 AP 1 damage 2 with sustained 1 as always. Of course we have the Hunter Killer and the Storm Bolter, but we're not going to be counting that in the comparison. And all the guns, and that is important, all of them, including the HK and the Storm Bolter, they get +1 AP against infantry. So unlike the Reaper, which its main rule only applies to the main gun, this rule applies to all of them. So the autocannon will become AP2, and the heavy bolters will become AP2 as well. As always, I want to remind you about my Patreon 40k coaching service. If you're looking for help building your competitive rosters, preparing you for tournaments, or have any questions about your collection in general, check out the links for my Patreon in the description. Thank you. So now let's look at durability, and is there anything to look at here? And the answer is no, because these two are pretty much identical. They both have smoke, they both are toughness 10, 3+ save, so yeah, it takes 7 shots of last cannon to kill the Predator, and it takes 8 shots barely to kill a Reaper, so they are pretty much the same thing. The only real difference I can see is that the Predator is a bit smaller, so it's easier to hide. It actually is easier to hide than the Gladiator. The newer Primaris vehicles are bigger as everything in Warhammer gets bigger, so from the competitive standpoint it's easier to find spots behind ruins to park the tank. But it's not such a groundbreaking difference that I would say that this gives an extra points or a lot of extra points to the Predator over the Reaper. Oh yeah, Reaper has extra wound, but the Predator is 0.5 points cheaper, so whatever. Now we come to the meat and potatoes of this video, which is the damage output. And as we've already discussed, these two have very different profiles on them, and therefore it's quite interesting to see who comes out on top. We will be comparing them against 2 main target types, 2 main infantry target types, which are 2 wound Marine models and 3 wound Terminators. Reason why I'm not comparing them against the Horde is simple. It's because the Reaper would win. Of course, a tank that has all of its guns as damage 1 would perform better than the tank that only has damage 2 and damage 3 guns. There's just no point to compare them because of how wound allocation works in Warhammer. If you're looking for a tank that fights hordes well, you already have your answer. You can click away from this video and have a nice day. But if you're still here, here is some information about the Marines and the Terminators. Against Termies, the Gladiator Reaper without Oath, that is important, does about 5.6 wounds roughly with its onslaught cannon, and we are fishing for devastating wounds here, so we are re-rolling the entire pack of wound rolls to find those 6s, because we are not really interested in trying to get through the 2+ armor save of the Terminators. We'll also do about 0.6 wounds from either the Icarus pod and the Tempest launchers that are not in rapid fire, so we are at about 24-inch range, because I wanted to compare them in a relatively common, normal scenario, not a perfect scenario. And of course, I'm counting the 0.1 wounds from the Stubber as well. And that comes to about 6.9 wounds, or about 2 dead Terminators and 1 wound on a guy. The Destructor at the same 24-inch range, so in rapid fire, so it has 6 shots with the autocannon, would do about 6.5 wounds to the Terminators. 4 of them would come from the autocannon, and 2.5 from them would come from the heavy bolters. Of course, I have to count the actual numbers of the wounds, even though technically the wounds cannot overflow. So we are looking at a rough number here, and obviously, when you're rolling dice, a damage 3 shot has a higher chance to just get through and kill the entire Terminator model, or it can be quite inefficient against a 2-wound model, because obviously the damage would be wasted. So bear with this simplicity that I'm adding, just so we can have an understanding of how these two tanks compare to each other. So as you can see, roughly, we are looking at a very similar number from either the Predator or the Destructor. I'm going to discuss the result in more detail at the end of the video. Against Intercessors, on the other hand, Reaper would do about 6.6 wounds from the Onslaught, 1.3 wounds from the Tempest, 1.1 wounds from the Icarus, and 0.3 from the Stubber, and a total of 9.4, so we can roughly say it's 5 dead Marines. Depending on how you roll, it's either 4 or 5. Mathematically, it's 4 Marines. Predator, on the other hand, would do about 4.4 wounds from the cannon and 4.4 wounds from the heavy bolter, coming to a total of 8.8 wounds, and I'm not counting the storm bolter here, so we can say it's 9. Or about 4 dead Marines as well. So, what is the conclusion from all of this? The overall view, my personal opinion, is that the Reaper is obviously a more versatile platform. It consistently does better against every target, even though by a small margin. The option to be very efficient against 1-wound models, and there are quite a lot of them in the game, like Gretchen with Orcs, it's Drukhari Infantry, it's Eldari Infantry. A lot of things have only 1 wound. And not losing efficiency when you're shooting at those units is very valuable. However, the Destructor, on the other hand, is a more specialized tool, and it works very well for its price against more elite infantry such as 2 wounds and 3 wounds models. We were comparing them against quite tough choices, so for example, if you were shooting at something like Possessed from the Chaos Space Marines book, where they have 3+ save and 5+ invulnerable save, it will be killing them even better with that 3 damage autocannon. Considering the hefty 20 points difference, point for point, the Destructor performs better against those more elite infantry choices than the Reaper. Both would benefit massively from Oath. However, Reaper would probably benefit even more because of how volatile usually the sustained hits abilities are. So when you're rerolling a bunch of dice, you can just roll a couple of 6s and then you get extra 4 hits. The fact that the Reaper has devastating wounds as the main thing pushing the wounds through the high toughness, or I should say 2+ save even more than toughness, because we are strength 6, so we are wounding most tough infantry on 3s, so we are mostly interested in the save here, and sometimes the Terminators in cover with Armor of Contempt are very much not fun to deal with, and the Predator would really struggle against those types of targets, unlike the Reaper, which the other guns it has would struggle, but the main one won't. Therefore, here's my verdict, and it's very simple. So if you have a very well-rounded list that already has anti-horde capabilities and anti-vehicle capabilities, because the devastating wounds the Reaper has will work just as well against vehicles and monsters as against infantry. Obviously, you're not going to get the sustained hits, but it's still something to keep in mind. You just need a good efficient tool against more elite infantry. The Destructor would do quite well, especially considering the range difference, because the Reaper can only fire 24 inches, so it needs to get relatively close to that infantry, where the minimum distance on the Destructor is 36 and the autocannon can actually do pretty well at 48. Of course, you still want to get into rapid fire with the autocannon, that's where we were comparing them, but that's a nice thing to have in your back pocket ability to reach out further if you need to. Otherwise, the Reaper is hands down the best choice, and especially in Iron Storm if you are planning to use Mercy's weakness, which is going to be popping those extra hits on the 5s. And just imagine that with Oath. Ugh, that's even painful to think about. So let me know what you think if you're using any of these tanks in your list and which one is your favorite. I would love to hear that in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.